continue the meeting. Dr. Cox?
Yes, the next item on the agenda would be the board chairman report. Mr. Hughes.
Okay. We have decided to meet for a workshop on September the 17th at 4:30, and then the meeting at 6:30. Is that okay with everyone? And then under 6A, that item will be pulled to be considered maybe later. And other than that, that's all I have, Dr. Cox.
Thank you, Mr. Hughes. Then continuing with unfinished business, item 6B, turf fields, and as we discussed in the work session, this is consideration for potentially soliciting requests for proposal for turf fields at West Ridge High School and Sullivan East High School. Just a little bit of information. We have talked to the folks in Hawkins County who recently secured their services. The total cost of their project is about $1.2 million for that, and we have reached out to those companies to talk with us. So this evening I present to you a recommendation that we would entertain the option to put out a request for proposal for turf fields at West Ridge High School and Sullivan East High School.
We have a recommendation. I'll make the motion. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Jones. Discussion.
I actually have a motion to amend.
Motion to amend is on the floor.
The motion to amend is to actually ask for the same RFP for the swimming pool at West Ridge High School. So we can actually look at that also, since there was a plan drawn to actually have the RFP, the same thing.
Mark's made a motion to amend. We're now looking for a second. Mr. Robinson seconds the motion. Discussion on the motion?
With everything we've told, and we had people from our booster clubs, people from all over the county came up to us and they're telling us what was promised to them. And I think that in good faith that we actually have told people, and I understand what people are saying as far as that it really wasn't part of our plan, but we did plan them. We did tell them that it's a jewel of the county. It's going to be the best facility in the county. We're going to make sure that we can compete with all the other city facilities. And if we're going to look at making turf an aspect of it, which I agree with at West Ridge, I think it's a fantastic idea at West Ridge, that we shouldn't be taking those kids and putting them on a bus and taking them to Central High School to swim. I think it's really hard to say that we should pick football over swimming, any sport over another sport, but I see that as going to be a future cost of $100 each way according to our busing system now, so that basically ends up being $1,000 a week during that system, during that time. That's a lot of money that we should have. So that is basically my whole motion, is that let's look at that, because it's never been brought before the board to vote. It's never been brought before us to sit back and say we agree or we don't agree. It seems like there was a number that was brought forward that someone dismissed without us actually having a vote. And no matter what we do, I believe we should have a vote so that everyone knows where we actually stand.
I want to be sure I'm understanding what you're actually asking for, because a full-blown estimate for them to work up was going to cost an enormous amount of money just to get the plans drawn up. And the reason we didn't go any farther is that we saw the price was prohibitive. Now, are you asking for a rough estimate or a complete analytical cost analysis?
I would like us to take the plan that was given to us. If that is a plan that's $5 to $8 million, whatever that number is, whatever they did on the original concept, whatever they said that it was, to bring that forward for a vote. If we put that as part of this RFP, or if we make it separate, that's fine. But that, what they brought, should not be dropped because someone didn't like it without board vote. We should take board action.
In order to have board, in order to have board action, I think the architect fees had to be included on that. Back when that motion was made originally about 3 years ago, before you can get a bid, you would have to have the architects draw plans, and those plans would have to be approved by the board and then submitted out for approval. So you're looking at additional cost figures there. I would maintain that we keep these two issues separately and keep the turf bid for both Central, or both East and West Ridge separate from the others. And if we go to the extent of getting architectural plans, you're going to have money in the budget to get the plans drawn for a swimming pool, plus then bids for that, and that would be a long drawn-out process. I do not think that there was ever any official plans drawn, at least they weren't approved by the board, but the estimates was given on a temporary drawing. You might want to go back and look at that, but you'd have to have official architectural plans before you could actually submit that for an RFP.
And Mark, it's been years, and I'm going to say the cost of that was like $30,000. I mean, to get the complete details. I mean, that's for the reason Randall, am I remembering correctly?
I don't remember the cost, but it was fairly significant as to what it was going to cost to get those plans drawn. And that when the estimate was given of over $5 million, that's when it was dropped, because it was not in the budget and it was not in the bond monies.
And I agree with Randall. I don't have any problem with, if we want to move forward and get some kind of rough estimate. I wouldn't spend. I'd want to know what the architects was going to charge to draw up a detailed set of plans before I said anything like that. But I'd rather keep these two issues separate, because I think you're going to be surprised when you see the cost of the detailed plans the architect will draw up.
Okay. I understand what you're saying. I truly do. But I think whenever it was brought forward, I made the motion. I know for a fact it was done that we were going to have them bring forward plans. And those plans were never brought forward. So I don't think that anyone should have looked at that and said, it's going to be cost prohibitive, so we dropped it without board action. We should have actually brought that forward and said, this is how much it's going to be, and then at that point we can make our decision. And it very well may not pass, but it should be voted on. It's not something that can be dropped without being brought forward, and that's my opinion.
We did discuss it at a workshop, and you were there, I think. And I know you haven't. You're not remembering that, and it could be that you weren't there, but we did discuss it at a workshop, and the architects gave us a rough price and a rough set of a rough draft, and we decided that's as far as we wanted them to go because the cost of a detailed set of plans.
And if I remember correctly, the plans that you discussed the night the motion was made was to build a freestanding building for the swimming pool to be separate from the rest of the building at the back of the auxiliary gym, if I'm not mistaken. So there was never...
That was what Deneen said would be the best, so I said, that's fine, give us some kind of a price on that.
And there was never any plans drawn for that, never any discussion after that other than the rough estimate of $5 to $8 million for the swimming pool.
Well, an RFP, unless I'm misunderstanding, is a request for pricing. I'm not sure the exact words, but it's basically requesting a price. So we can do an RFP also from the architects to tell us how much it would be for them to continue the drawings and them to bring those prices forward, and then we as a board should decide if we're going to proceed or not, because I don't know about you guys, in my area I'm getting beat up quite a bit on no pool. I hear it quite often, and I'm really tired of hearing that I'm not putting a pool with us actually never voting for it. So I think we need to sit back and say, if we're not going to do a pool, that's up to the people that vote against it. But we need to bring it forward for a vote to where we actually can say, yes, it was brought forward. Yes, we decided to drop it. Not someone dropped it because they didn't like a price and it was never brought forward to a vote. That should never have happened. It should never have happened.
It wasn't somebody. It was this group.
You can't drop it in a work session. That's not the way that it works. If it's approved by us to go get it, then they have to bring it back to us, and then we decide if it's going to happen or not. That's not the way it's supposed to work.
This was a request that you made 3 years ago, and then now 3 years later is the first time in a public meeting that you brought it before this body here. The plan then was we had a budget, money was not there for it. If we get architectural plans for a freestanding building and a swimming pool, that's great, but it would take probably at least a year for you to fulfill that. And if we don't move on the turf, then of course the plan as it was bid was to have a grass football field with irrigation system, and if we don't move forward rather soon, then the grass is what it will have to be moving forward with that. And
I understand what you're saying, and I'm not saying that you're wrong. Yes, it's been a long time since we've actually talked about it, but up until just a couple months ago, I've been asking where the thing was, and then I was told that it's dropped. So what I'm saying is now, it's fine. Okay, let history be history. That's fine. We had something come to the architects. The architects brought it. If it was at a work session, I wasn't there. I'm not saying that I was. I'm just saying it never came to a group that I was at, and it absolutely never came to a vote. So it needs to come to a vote. We need to, if they want to bring it back in RFP and say, this is how much it would cost for us to do the plans, and we decide not to, then we as a board should decide not to. It should not be dropped without board action. And if you want to make this a separate request, that's fine. But I'm just saying, I would like to put that forward, that we need to have an RFP, I think is the appropriate term, for them to draw the plans, to say how much it's going to be, bring that to us so that we can have board action on it. If you want me to make it a second motion and pull it apart from this one, that's fine, but I do want it to happen.
it would
be a separate motion, it would be a two-step process because you have to.
plans, and then after, if those were approved, then you would issue another RFP for bids on an actual swimming pool.
Right,
So,
I agree, but I mean, an RFP for them to come forward and say, this is how much it would cost for us to do it, I think that's pretty straightforward.
That's
So-
fine, but I would prefer that we keep it separate so that it
Okay.
doesn't tie this up.
Okay, do you still want to vote on that amendment, or do you want to pull it and keep it separate?
I'll withdraw it and put it back into it. I mean, I'll actually make
Okay.
the motion after this
Okay.
original RFP, I'll make it into the second motion.
That's withdrawn. Let's have the original vote. We had a motion and a second.
And that's to get estimates on. That's to get estimates on Sullivan East High School and Westridge High School for turf for both fields. Is that correct?
That is
And
correct.
I think we wanted to amend it as an addendum to also get an estimate for the baseball and softball. That would be an addendum to the one for the football. You do it as two separate bids, if I understand things correctly. Is that right, Randall?
So let me ask for a motion or just a clarification. All we're doing is asking for someone to bring us a price. We're not voting on doing it. We're just voting on letting someone bring us a price for the football field in both locations and the baseball, softball fields in both locations. But we're not looking to spend money, and we're not sending anything to the county commission to let us spend money. Is that correct or not correct?
That's correct. When they bring it to us, if we vote to accept their bids, then we have to send a request to the county commission to use fund balance money to pay for that. And the bid would not be awarded unless it was approved. The money would have to be approved before it could be done.
The one thing I would like to ask is that we ask for that separately, as a combined price for both facilities, all four both locations, football, baseball, and softball, and then just Westridge only. I would like it to be two separate prices so we know what we're actually doing, because you know my considerations, and I talked to in the work session, and it's for another day to talk about it. But I would like for them to give us two prices, one Westridge only and one combined.
I think the recommendation, though, was that we get a combined price. If you want to do that, that might require an amendment, correct, Mr. Jones?
Motion to amend.
So now Mark has an amendment on the floor to amend the original motion to separate the prices on the two schools. He will need a second on that. Mr. Robinson seconds the motion. Discussion on that motion.
the discussion that I'll start discussion since of my amendment, but we are building a brand-new high school, and when you build a brand-new high school, that's when you do the roads, you do the sports facilities, you do all those things. That's when you do turf. I think we need to finish that school before we start working on another school in the county. The reason I'm saying this is because when we built East Middle School, it was fantastic. We did everything we could for it. I made a motion to expand it and make it larger because I didn't think it was big enough. I never begrudged that school getting one thing. As a matter of fact, I celebrated everything that it got. All I'm asking for is for us to do the high school to the best of our ability and do it correctly before we start spending money on another school. If they have RFP, and it comes back that it's not going to be a significant amount of money to do East, then that's something that we need to look at and maybe be able to do it all together. But I don't think we should just automatically say we're going to do one without the other when we really should be focused, in my opinion, on making Westridge the best it can be and getting turf at Westridge.
I would not support putting turf at East and not putting it at Westridge, and therefore I will not support the opposite. I want to improve both high schools. One of the advantages to go into two high schools is that in the future we can have nicer facilities. The cities each have just one high school, so therefore they're able to have nicer facilities. I want, moving forward, that both of those high schools to get the same thing, and we start here. I will fight to the death for Westridge, but I will not agree to make an addition over there that we don't do at East High School. Anyone else?
I would just say that looking at the Boardsmanship Code of Ethics, Sullivan County planning a joint venture, which we all attended last fall, Article 3, Section 2 says, I will support, Article 2, Section 2 says, I will represent at all times the entire school community.
I want us to make sure that we're all talking about the same thing. My understanding would be an RFP is a request for proposals, and that's actually inviting people to make proposals. We generally do that when we're hiring architects or lawyers or something like that. If we're putting it out for bids, then I think the motion ought to be to ask for bids for that project. Now, my understanding of what that's going to involve is we'll have to have our architects draw plans so that they'll be able to bid. I mean, I don't think we can just say, do these two fields. I think they will have to say, it'll be so big by so big, it'll have this kind of drainage. So that's going to be a long process in my mind. But anyway, I would draw a distinction there. So if that's what we're looking at, putting it out for bids, then I would say let's have the motion say that.
The plan's already drawn for the softball fields and the football fields, especially at Westridge and the baseball fields. The specifications are there. It's just a matter of asking then for the bids on replacing that with turf. Right now it calls for irrigation system with grass. Now we may have to get the plans for the east football field, but the plans are available from Mr. Hubbard for the east football field. So I don't think it would require asking the architects to do anything as far as drawing any type of plan for those fields. Those should be in existence already, and it's just a matter of the covering that we're going to use.
Yes, in fact, the architects we're well aware of what we're doing, and he's correct. This is different than something like the pool. You don't need the architectural those drawings in this case, because it's a standard process a lot of times. You know, about every field that's already established is the same, and at Westridge it's actually a little easier because they don't have anything to undo out there. We're still at the stage where they haven't went too far for the drainage.
Mr. Hughes, did you say in the work meeting that maybe, is it on, last week, that if you did the combined fields of both Westridge and East High School, there would be a discounted price or a...
I expect that there will be, because, and I'm basing it off of what happened in Hawkins County, and after talking to them, we got a rough idea of what it's going to cost to have both fields done. And the combined price is just a little higher than the original price I'd asked back last year to have one school done. So, yeah, I think we can expect to get a better price that way.
I think it's time for us to come together as a county, and we've got 2 high schools, or will have, starting next August, and support both of the high schools equally. I think the same is going to be said when we start looking at renovations to South Middle School and Central Middle School. I hope that there would not be resistance from anybody from the eastern end because they want to upgrade those 2 middle schools. So I think if we need to look at ourselves as one unit because we are one school system. We have 2 high schools, and eventually we will have only 3 middle schools. And I would hope that this time next year we'll be fighting to get monies to renovate the 2 middle schools down in the central zone and the south zone to make them comparable to Sullivan East Middle School. So we're all in this together, or at least we should be. And if we need to bid these separately, we can, but it's probably going to cost money extra if we have 2 separate prices on it.
The thing that I'm looking at, and again, just my opinion, this is an apple and an orange. The apple is we don't have anything there. They need to start the drainage. They need to do everything from scratch, and they're going to do that. Either it's going to be turf or grass, but they're going to do all that automatically. So that money is already built in to some degree, and it's going to be a much lower price than going up and tearing up a field, putting in new drainage, putting in all the things that's going to have to happen. So in my opinion, instead of saying it's going to be a grand total price, and it still may be something that gets voted through, I firmly believe it will. But I don't think we should go forward and act like it's going to be the same price at East as at Westridge, whenever we know that one is going to be a brand new construction and the other is going to be, well, like you said, the plans are exact. We know exactly what it is at Westridge. At East, I think it's going to be a much harder process, much more costly process to dig up an existing and put down the turf. I think we should at least have the option of looking at those separately and together. If they're willing to do a price together, it would be very simple for any business to say this is how much it would be individually. So I think we should ask for that, and it doesn't matter what happens. All we're asking for is a price. It's not saying which way we're going to go. We just need a price.
I like what Randall said. When it comes time to spend money to renovate South, or I'd hate to think that any one of my colleagues from the other end of the county would fight against it or speak against it. I won't do it then. I won't tolerate it now. I will fight for Westridge or South or any school in the district, but I certainly will not agree to put turf on one high school and have the other high school go without. This is an opportunity for us, not an opportunity to make enemies on each end of the county. It's an opportunity for all of us to show that we're one county. I want Westridge to be successful, and nobody has fought harder for that school. And I want the kids at East. I will see that the kids at East have everything that the kids at Westridge have. That school is going to be unbelievable already, with or without turf. The East has had very little work done to it since 1969. We finally got some improvements around the football field in the last couple of years, and now it's time to take another step. I hope that every project we do within the county, that we look at which end of the county it's on or where it's at or who got what. I want everybody in the county to benefit in every way. And I think this sets a bad precedence, Mark. I think this is an opportunity, and I can't believe that you would even consider putting turf at Westridge, with, as nice as that school is going to be, knowing that the students at East deserve it just as much.
You can try to paint me as a bad guy, and that's fine. I understand. But what I'm saying is, I think it's crazy for us to ask for a total package without knowing how much each part of that package is costing. I'm not saying we're going to do it. We're not saying we're going to do it even if we get the RFP. Nothing about that says it. All I'm saying is we need to know how much it's going to cost at both locations, individually and together, and that's all I'm asking. We need to know how much it's going to cost.
And let's make it clear, we're not asking for new money. What we're asking for will be permission to use money out of our current fund balance. We're not asking the county commission to put up any more money out of tax money, so it's not going to be an increase in the budget there. We would simply be asking to use money in our current fund balance to pay for these expenses. And as far as the separate pricing, when you put them together, most companies are going to bid those separately and then put it together with one lump sum and say this is what it will be for both. But what I hear you saying is that you don't want it to do it at East at the same time that we're doing it at Westridge. And what I support and what I hear from here, Mike and Randall, is that if we do it at one, let's do it at both. I agree with that. How we price it is immaterial. The bottom line is it's going to be the same, and it's going to come out of our fund balance. We'll have to with county commission approval if we are able to do it. But I think it's time that we move forward and not kick the can down the road anymore as far as trying to get something done. And the idea of doing the softball infields and baseball infields, I believe, is what was discussed earlier by some coaches asking for that. I think that's a great idea to add that on, because maybe at the same time we get a cheaper deal on that, and it would allow better use of these community facilities, and that's what they are. They belong to the community.
And Mr. Austin, I don't disagree with pricing, and I don't think Mr. Jones does either, but I do disagree with the sentiment of that we shouldn't want to do it at both. I think it's obvious you're going to have some cost savings. I mean, you've seen that in a separate county, and to your reference, any business that you use that term, any business, and I used to do construction law in Atlanta, that a contractor is going to be cheaper if you give them more work. I mean, because you have workforce capacity and manpower and utilizing the job sites. So I don't object to breaking down prices, but I do to the sentiment of I want to put Westridge over any other school just because it's a new school we're building all over the surface of a football field. And to Mr. Jones' point, and he hit on it, and it kind of goes away from this whole debate, but what I want everybody to understand is even if we're not asking to use new money, and for the people that support these turf fields and these improvements, this board can't use even those undesignated funds in the fund balance that was referenced by our last speaker about the $10 million without going to the county commission and getting approval. Perfect example of that is when we bought the land for the Sullivan East Middle School that Mr. Iverson said he never begrudged, although he voted against a land purchase that was already approved a few weeks ago. We still have to go back to the county commission to get that approval. Another example, and it caused the delay in the opening of Sullivan East Middle School, was a sewer line that we had the money for and we were ready to move forward, but it did not get approved by the county commission. It delayed a whole semester of school. So this board can't just, everybody talks about a fund balance. We can't use it however we want. We have to spell it out. We have to go to the county commission. So a lot of these issues, I want the public to understand this board doesn't have complete control over it, and we continually approve them, and we try to get improvements, but you have to have 13 votes at the county commission.
I think the two estimates is best, and My theory on that is you keep saying that just because we do it, if we got two high schools, we need to do it two places. Whatever we do it one, we do it the other. East has got a pool. It may not be working right now, but we're fixing to get it repaired. Okay, and the thing that really aggravates me more than anything is the booster for Westridge said this was spoken, he asked about it in January. This is August, and you're telling us that if we don't get this done, if we don't get turf and we go with grass, there's no way they can get the grass on there and we can play our first game next year. So our arms is pretty much twisted. I want to see the same thing at every school we got. I do. Okay? But I'd like to see that pool and that turf at Westridge. We can put it in writing somewhere down the road to put the turf at East. Make our schools the same. I get that. I like that. I'm all for that. I wish we'd have done that years ago when we wouldn't have been in this situation right now.
Mr. Robinson, I don't believe I understood your comment about January. I didn't hear that well. Could you repeat that?
The booster for Westridge said he asked about turf in January. The new booster for Westridge. Well, he sat there and told us he said it to somebody. I don't know who he said it to, but I would think, and I don't, if they're having meetings on the athletic stuff, and I was pretty sure I was told I was on the athletic committee, and I'm not getting told none of that stuff anymore, so I don't kind of understand that either. So it's kind of getting to where it's hush-hush.
I just know when I was contacted, and it was the week prior to our August 7th meeting. And I can't even remember the lady's name, but it wasn't the gentleman that was here a minute ago, Mr. Osborne. It was a lady that called me, and she asked me to bring it to the board. So I don't know anything about January, but really, that's neither here nor there. We have a decision to make now, and whether we make that decision or not depends on whether East or Westridge, either one has it. Because I think what you're hearing is the majority of this board is going to support doing it on both fields. So if you want it at Westridge, we're going to have it at East. And if you don't want it at Westridge, we'll have grass. Anyone else? Let's yes. Let's call the question. Randall, help clarify again, because I knew you added the addendum. Clarify the motion again that we're voting on, so that we've talked so long now.
My motion is that we make a request for bids.
That's actually not. We have to vote on my motion to amend first before we go back to the original motion. I had a second. I had a second on my motion to amend, which was to get separate bids for both.
Oh, okay.
We got to go with that before we go to the original.
See, I told you we've talked too long. All right, we have the motion to amend to get separate bids. Call that question, please.
Mr. Ireson?
Yes.
Mr. Jones? No. Mr. Robinson? Yes. Mr. Spivey? Yes. Ms. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Gilmore? No. Mr. Hughes?
No. Now we have the original motion.
Yes. 4-3. So original motion as amended is what's on the paper.
Okay. I'll repeat it as amended, and I think it's probably going to turn out to be the same thing that you just said, maybe worded in a different way. But I make the motion that we go out for bids on placing turf at Westridge High School and East High School, along with the infield areas of the baseball fields at both facilities. And as amended, it would be separate bids and also a joint bid.
Add softball to that, please, sir.
Okay. I thought I did, but softball and baseball at both facilities. And we would be getting bids for that as a total package deal, and it would be broken down also then for the separate schools and the separate facilities at each school. Is that correct? Does that meet the...
I'm guessing soccer plays on the football field, right? 'Cause you can look at me and tell I'm no soccer player. I know East is, their principal said soccer would be on the football field. We're not leaving nobody out, correct?
Westridge has soccer field.
That was separate practice field.
It's only practice.
I think so.
I think the principal told us that they're going to add soccer this year, if I remember correctly. I just don't want to leave a sport out. You know, it's,
We don't have, I can't hardly hear, I'm sorry. We don't have a soccer field at East. We have a field at the middle school that they may utilize if they have soccer this year.
but Mr. Hare, he told us that the soccer would be played on the football field. I just want to make sure at Westridge, is the soccer teams, are they going to use the football field as their field, or do they have a separate field? I don't want to leave a sport out. If we're going to turf football, baseball, softball, let's not leave somebody out.
Great point, but I have no idea.
That'd be up to them. I mean, they're going to have an extra field there. They could use the football field or the other field, either one.
Well, if you would like, you can actually make a motion to amend that if the soccer field, I mean, the price too. I have no idea if there's a soccer field other than a practice field. I thought it was only practice.
I'll amend the motion again and restate it to include the athletic facilities at Westridge High School that would require the use of turf to include football, baseball, softball, and if needed, soccer. And at Sullivan East High School, it would include softball, baseball, and football. And we'd have the bids broken out separately, and then when they come back to the board, we would be able to vote on the bids as a total package or on the bids individually, and if soccer was needed, and if it's, I think it's just a practice field, but you may be right, it may be a regular separate facility. But that would require a second.
And a combined price. Okay.
I'll second that.
All right. Christie, call the question.
Mr. Hughes,
Yes.
Mr. Ireson,
Yes.
Mr. Jones,
Yes.
Mr. Robinson, Mr. Spivey, Ms. Thomas,
Yes.
Mr. Gilmore.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is consideration of the Holston Valley Middle School property, and I think Mr. Hull has just an update on that.
You had asked that we move forward to sell that property, which we began working on, and once we got all the specifications ready to put out to bid, I realized that the deeds to those properties have quite a few errors in them, and so I did report back to you, and we agreed to get a survey of that property. We should have that next week, and as soon as we have that, I will go ahead and turn that over to Ms. Davis to put it out for bids. So hopefully we will get moving on that absolutely as quickly as we can.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hull. So we move now to item 7, which is new business, and first up, we bring a recommendation to the board to adopt policy 6.409, reporting child abuse. Also, we would request the waiver of the rules and to adopt the policy on first reading. So we are requesting a two-step, first of all, to waive the rules, and second of all, to adopt the policy.
I'll make the motion to waive the rules.
I'll second. Christie?
Who seconded him? Spivey's motion, who seconded? She didn't hear the second. Was it Michael?
Michael.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Ross?
Yes.
Mr. Spivey?
Yes.
Ms. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Gilmore? Mr. Hughes?
Yes.
Mr. Iverson?
Yes. So now the rule and motion.
Now we need a motion to adopt the policy.
Okay, now you have a recommendation to adopt the policy. Do I hear a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Mr. Spivey. Do I hear a second? Second by Mr. Thomas. Discussion. Hearing none.
Mr. Robinson?
Yes.
Mr. Spivey?
Yes.
Ms. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Gilmore? Mr. Hughes?
Yes.
Mr. Iverson?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Thank you. Item 7B is we're asking approval for the contract for ClearPass. This is the filtering software.
We have a recommendation. Do I hear a motion? Motion by Mr. Gilmore, second.
Second.
Second by Mr. Iverson. Discussion. Hearing none.
Mr. Spivey? Ms. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Gilmore? Mr. Hughes?
Yes.
Mr. Iverson?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Robinson?
Yes.
Thank you. Item 7C is a proposal to reimburse bus drivers employed by Sullivan County for the DOT physical. This is an item that was requested by the board for us to bring to you, so we do recommend it.
You have a recommendation. Before I ask for the motion, I'll remind you that you have a packet in your worksheet that, since we didn't get to it in the workshop, you have the details in your worksheet. So I'm now looking for a motion.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Jones, second by Ms. Thomas. Discussion.
Just to clarify, there's 2 points to that. Is this just for the reimbursement for the physical exam right now?
There are two separate items. D is a proposal to increase the pay, which is item 2.
Okay, I just wanted to make
Yes.
clear what we're talking about.
Both recommendations are addressed on the same sheet, but the item that we're requesting you to vote on now is C, the proposal to reimburse the drivers for the physicals.
The cost of the physical, right?
Yes.
The $75
Yes.
required by the DOT to have a CDL.
That's correct.
Okay.
And just to clarify also, this is only for the ones we employ, not contractors. Just
That's-
our employees.
Mr. Miller, that's correct, right? Yes.
And I think Mr. Miller said the daily rate would be that of a first-year driver, the new rate.
I think, are you talking about the second item? That's why I wanted to clarify, Ms. Thomas. I think we're talking about the first one right now. Just the physical
I
cost.
understand
Anyone else? Call the question.
Ms. Thomas?
that. Yes.
Mr. Gilmore? Mr. Hughes?
Yes.
Mr. Iverson?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Robinson?
Yes.
Mr. Spivey?
Yes.
Thank you. Now, item D references point 2 on your information sheet. This is a proposal to increase the substitute bus driver's pay. And just to clarify, from $55 today to $68.64. This does not include drivers employed by contractors.
You have a recommendation. Do I hear a motion? I'll make the motion. Hear a second? Mr. Robinson seconds the motion. Discussion? Hearing none.
Mr. Gilmore? Mr. Hughes?
Yes.
Mr. Iverson?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Robinson?
Yes.
Mr. Spivey?
Yes.
Ms. Thomas?
Yes.
Thank you. And the final item we present as a recommendation under item E, 7E, is an amendment to the Rights and Responsibilities Handbook that you have previously approved, and this is the inclusion of a consent and waiver form that's in your packet.
Have a recommendation. Do I hear a motion? Motion by Mr. Gilmore. Do I hear a second?
I'll second that.
Mr. Spivey seconds the motion. Questions on the motion? Call the question.
Mr. Gilmore, Mr. Hughes,
Yes.
Mr. Ireson,
Yes.
Mr. Jones,
Yes.
Mr. Robinson,
Yes.
Mr. Spivey,
Yes.
Ms. Thomas.
Yes.
And Mr. Hughes, before we ended up, that one thing that I was wanting to bring forward, I want to add that in there as far as getting the RFP for us, bringing the swimming pool forward. Do we say we're going to make that a separate motion?
Yes, sir.
And I'd like to do that before we go. Okay.
You want, are you,
I'd like to make the motion.
then the motion?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I really don't know if it needs a motion because it should have been already brought. So you tell me, do I need to make a motion or no?
Mr. Jones, is that motion okay at this meeting, since it did not appear on the agenda? It's okay. Then we have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second? Discussion?
Just to clarify, you're saying to find out the cost from the architect first, correct, about the pool, and then come back to us, and then we could vote on whether we wanted to put it out for proposal.
Exactly. I just want to see what they brought forward and let us vote on it. Yes.
Okay.
Yours is to get the cost estimate for the architects to draw the plans, right?
Yes, I mean, if they have initial data that they want to bring us, that's fine, but yes, I do want to get the initial cost estimate to draw the plans, yes.
Okay. Any other questions? Hearing none.
Mr. Hughes,
Yes.
Mr. Ireson,
Yes,
Mr. Jones,
Yes.
Mr. Robinson,
Yes.
Mr. Spivey,
Yes.
Ms. Thomas,
Yes.
Mr. Gilmore.
Before we adjourn, I've got a couple more things. Mr. Jones, I will yield the floor to you for just a few moments. I know you have a few final comments, and then I have a final thought before we close the meeting.
We are continually looking for ways to meet the needs of all the parents and the teachers when it comes to starting school back. We don't have the answers, that's pretty obvious, but we also know that we're struggling to look for those answers. And there's a diversity of opinions as to when we should start school. But right now, the hybrid schedule starts on August the 24th, unless there's something that happens between now and then that would cause a call board meeting to change that. But we are continually trying to look for other ways to provide online learning for those parents who want it, and Dr. Cox is continuously looking at those ways, and we as board members are trying to find other ways to do that, and also trying to find ways to do some face-to-face instruction for those that want it. That's probably about as simple as I can put it. I have some ideas that I will share with Dr. Cox about this later for investigative purposes to see if we can use some of them. But right now, they're simply ideas of how we might be able to do some things that will meet the needs of all people. Because those who were here tonight, we appreciate your sharing your thoughts. We appreciate the opinion. We appreciate the facts that you've given to us. But at this point, there's no recommendation for any change other than the hybrid schedule that's scheduled to go on the 24th of August. Matthew?
Mike, can I say something before, if you want to end? Okay. I made the comment at the last meeting that I think we need to be very transparent, and I rarely make speeches at things like this if you look back over the past 4 years, but I want to be very transparent. I appreciate everybody that came out. I think every single speaker made a good point in it. One of them mentioned that, we shouldn't say this is hard because we signed up for it. Well, just because we say it's hard, it doesn't mean we don't acknowledge we signed up for it, but but we also can't stick our head in the sand and just decide that because we're all sick of the circumstances, we're going to ignore them. I think everybody on this board cares about the children. We all want the same things parents want. I'm a parent too. I'm dealing with the same thing that I heard from working parents. My wife works, she's an essential worker, she works at the VA. I'm dealing with this exact same thing. I know how hard it is. It's horrible, honestly. But it's horrible for the teachers, it's horrible for the administrators. I'll say this, I don't think anybody out there except for public educators could deal with this as well as they have dealt with this. If you threw that in the lap of everybody sitting in this room right now and we had to accomplish it, I don't think we could do it. It's really easy for us to say we want kids back in school. I think everybody on both sides of that issue agrees with that sentiment, and that learning's better, and that people are falling through the cracks. And unfortunately, it does go. Dr. Estes that spoke actually used to be my kid's doctor. She lives right down the street from me. I respect her greatly. I don't necessarily agree with her overall sentiment, and I think if you questioned her on it, she might limit it down to K through 5, which is what I'm the most concerned about in this age group. But we heard a lot of statistics, and I know these numbers change every day. But one thing I want everybody to keep in mind, and it shows the importance of not playing any politics in this, whether you want to wear a mask or whether you don't want to wear one up here, you can't label somebody that way. What we have to acknowledge in Sullivan County as we sit here right now, and you can go look it up on the Tennessee Department of Health's website, and you can follow Governor Lee's recommendations on his plan and the White House Task Force plan. Sullivan County is 95th in testing in the state out of 95 counties. That means last, okay? We need to be honest about that. We need to put more pressure on our public health people and leaders at higher levels that have control about that, because that's the only way we're going to get schools open again, full face-to-face, which is what we all want. It's what I want for my kids. It's what I want for all the kids in Sullivan County. Number 2, under the White House Task Force guidelines, and I want to make sure I'm calling them the right thing so somebody can't say I'm blind or I made it up. You can go look it up. There's a link to it on the Tennessee Department of Health website. Not only are we last in testing, but under the White House guidelines, based on the most recent White House Task Force report as of today, their red zone is designed by the White House Task Force report for opening schools. The red zone is defined as during the last week reported both new cases above 100 per 100,000 population and a diagnostic test positivity result above 10%. Well, we're in the red under the White House Task Force guidelines, folks. So it's easy for somebody higher up to push a problem down. Well, we're down at the bottom, but we're not really at the bottom sitting at this table. The teachers are. And now I know the whole community is, and parents are struggling, and kids are struggling, but the only way that we're going to figure this out is if we don't play any kind of politics or agenda, but we just have an open, honest, transparent conversation. And I really appreciate the young lady that came out and spoke, because I really feel for students. When I was 17 years old, that would have been me standing there saying, let me in school. And I wish there was an easy solution. We're doing our best, and I'll commit that I'm happy to meet weekly as a board. I mean, we have a scheduled meeting in September, but I'm happy to continue to evaluate this weekly because it is ever-changing. But one thing we need to do for our teachers and for our parents, and why I wish we would take it up more now, is right or wrong, there isn't a right or wrong choice, but what we do need to do is we do need to give people some ability to try to plan. Now, one other thing I want to acknowledge, and then I'll be quiet, is even under this hybrid model, if we follow CDC guidelines and all the American Pediatrics Association and all the stats cited by the people that were in favor of opening up schools face-to-face again, that requires a safe environment and following those guidelines. We are being told by our teachers in the public work session that they can't provide that. And it's not because of taping the floor, it's because these walls are cement. Public schools are designed to fit as many kids as you legally can in them. So we need to be honest about that. I mean, we can't just magically make this happen and make it safe. So if we're being told it's not safe, even if my own personal opinion is I want to send my kid to school, it's very hard to sit up here and vote for a full reopening. Oh, I didn't finish my thought. I lost my train of thought. My whole point of saying that was this. If we follow the Tennessee Department of Health and Governor Lee and Commissioner Swinn's advice that was released yesterday, and we follow the White House CDC guidelines, what you all have to realize is even were we to open on August 24th, what you've seen from the sports teams with the volleyball team at East and the football team at North, and it's a new one every day in Kingsport City and Sullivan County and all our surrounding counties, is once that happens, if you follow the metric and the rubric from the Department of Health and all of these guidelines that are the precondition to being safe, it means that if you can't contact trace all the people that person was within, which is defined as within 6 feet for a 10-minute cumulative period, that you have to shut that sport down or that team down or that classroom down. And even under the Tennessee Department of Health and Commissioner Swinn's guidelines, that also requires either cleaning that classroom or cleaning that building and shutting it down for 24 hours. And if you can't trace all the contacts, what do you have to do? You're supposed to seriously consider closing down that building for 14 days. This was just released today on the Tennessee Department of Health's website, and I read all of that, and I'm not looking for an excuse with an agenda. I'm trying to be transparent about what we're supposed to consider as a Board of Education.
I visited 3 schools today, and each school is so different. Sullivan Elementary, the rooms are kind of long and narrow, and one of the teachers had the tape measure out to show me what it would take to seat everyone 6 feet apart. And even though I've dealt a lot with measurements and things of that nature, when you get in a room that tight, it was different. Then I went into the art room, and I found the same thing, but it was laid out totally different, and there was no way to get half of the class in there and be 6 feet apart at that particular point. So they'll have to make adjustments when we come down to the hybrid schedule. But we are continually looking for a way, even in the hybrid, for parents to stay online if that is their desire. We may not be able to do it, but we're looking for those ways, and I want to assure you of that. We hear you. And you would think that the high school would be the easiest one to do when it comes to socially distancing, but when you think about changing the schedules or changing the periods 5 times a day, I guess, out in the hallways and eating lunch in the cafeteria, that's probably the hardest one. We can do the cohort groups when it comes to the elementary because they stay in the same room all day long, but that's not necessarily good either. So each school is different, just like each home is different. And I would encourage you to pray a lot and realize that we are looking for answers.
Yes, I would like to say, along that line, families do need to be responsible for their children, and I think they want to. Also, today, Governor Lee and Commissioner Swinn have communicated the necessity of checking in on all Tennessee children by encouraging child well-being checks. Now, I know they've gotten some real pushback on that, but that means that you will have an official coming into your home to determine the needs and safety, I guess. I find that very disturbing. So in going forward with this, we all need to keep our eyes wide open and be informed about what decisions are being made in our behalf.
And I guess my question is, when we passed this last week to go to the hybrid, it was if we get all of our cleaning supplies, if we get all of our PPE, if our teachers think we can social distance. I was in a school today, and I mean, they got tables in their rooms, and the tables ain't 6 feet. So are we getting plexiglass for them? I got kids that go to these schools, so it worries me. I mean, I talked to the teacher, some of them's worried, and I get the worry. I don't know about everybody else, but myself, I'm worried about it, scared about it. I put a yes on going to that hybrid. That worries me. I can't guarantee none of us is going to get sick, none of our teachers. But I see my girls learning at home, and that third grader is struggling. Okay, and I've seen the comments on Facebook. I've seen the emails about our teachers, and it's not right. Our teachers got dealt a bad hand here this year. I don't feel like they was prepared, and it wasn't their fault. So parents, I ask you to encourage your teacher. Give them a pat on the back. Tell them they're doing a good job. Them teachers at them schools is worrying about your kids just as much as you are. It's not all about education. They're worried about their health, their safety. They don't want to bring them into school thinking that they're going to get sick. And heaven forbid we lose one. I get what all the parents is saying. I get we got to work. I do. But I put my name as a yes on that hybrid. Heaven forbid we lose a student or a teacher. That's going to weigh on me. You need to take that into consideration whenever you're telling us to force these kids back into these schools wide open. Okay? I ask for prayers for all of our teachers and our students, our staff up at the office, and our director of schools, and this school board members right here, because we're going to need it this year. This is one of them situations where nobody's got the right answer. Everybody thinks different. But I can vouch for this, that everybody on this board right here wants nothing more than to finish this school year with every student, every teacher, every faculty, custodian, everybody we got in our buildings, we want them all at the end of the year. That's my goal. I want them to learn, yes, but I don't want to look back and say, we should have never done that. Please consider that whenever you're fussing at your teachers. I can take the heat. Call me whatever you want. Just don't ever tell me I don't care about these kids. Thank you.
Over the last few, I guess the last couple of weeks especially, I know every board member has gotten hundreds of emails, hundreds of calls, texts. I would like to say thank you for everyone that has sent me information. I'd like to apologize to the ones I haven't responded to or that I haven't been able to get back to, because we've all tried our best. And I think I've gotten them all, but I'm sure that I haven't. So if I've missed you, I do apologize. The one thing I will say is I work in a very technical field. I've done on-the-job training for 30 years, and I've done classroom training for 15 years. And the one thing I learned a long time ago is that no one will ever know how much you do to prepare for a lesson, but they'll know if you don't. These teachers are really, it's amazing what they're doing. I mean, they're learning on the fly. Their adaptation is just amazing that they're going through and finding ways of making it work. Their technology, they're leaps and bounds from where we started, but we're still having issues. I mean, there's places around our county that just can't get internet. But we're trying to work through that. We're getting hot spots, and we're trying to help everything like that. We're providing computers where we can. The system is really trying hard to do the right thing. The teachers are pulling off an amazing feat. People ask, well, why weren't you ready? I think that they're doing a great job from the position they were put into, and it's definitely not the teacher's fault. So please, I'm with Paul. I mean, give them a pat on the back, because it's amazing what they're doing. If you were to try it yourself, you'd see it's incredibly difficult. So the one thing I've said, and I was at 2 schools today, the same as everybody's visiting schools and trying to get teacher input, and we're getting parental input. Over the last couple days, the teachers are pretty much split, about 50-50. Some of them saying, I want to go back to school face-to-face tomorrow. Some of them say, it's not safe, I don't want to go back tomorrow. it's a pretty good split. The parents, it's a pretty good split, but they're way in the 90 percentile. We want our kids back tomorrow. And then there's a 10% that's saying, I'm not comfortable with that. So, again, one of those things that I've done for a long time is mediation and arbitration. I mean, you sit back and you say, let's look at what we have in common. And what we have in common is our kids. So what do we want? We all want our kids back in school. This whole board wants our kids back in school, face-to-face with teachers, where they're going to get the love and the guidance. They're going to get fed. They're going to get the mental health things that they need. Governor Lee said 75% across the country of students in public schools get mental health, either from counseling or just help. We know that child abuse cases are way down. It's not that they're not happening, they're just not getting reported. It's another job that teachers do. So we need the kids back in school. That's where they're going to get the most benefit. That's where they're going to be the best served. Okay, we can all agree on that. I believe we can all agree on that. The next thing you have to look at is how do you do that safely? And everyone is opening up. I agree with that. Everyone has things in place. I agree with that. But we have to look at what we can do and how we can do it, and we need to make sure all the PPE's there. Like Mr. Robinson said, the governor said he's sending us a kit. We haven't gotten all those kits yet. I was at a school today that was putting tape down on the floors because they're trying to make sure they can socially distance. One of the classes, they had tables where 4 kids can sit, kind of this style table. Socially distancing on that's impossible. We have to have 1 person per table. That's what we're doing up here. So they went to the warehouse and they got individual desks. So they're adapting to that. They had individual desks throughout the class. So they're working on it. And I really believe that they're trying their best to make it happen. And again, we all want our kids back, but we have to look at the safety, and the safety of it right now is we're working on that. We can't even get Lysol wipes. Most of us have enough for our kids to clean our teacher to clean our classes. I did find a company in Johnson City that makes Purell, and they said that they can actually provide us with enough hand sanitizers to take care of our 9,000 kids in 24 schools and all of our 800, 900 teachers. So that's a good step, but we're working on it. And I think I want to echo the sentiments of a lot of people here. Go give that teacher a pat on the back virtually. You can't really get them, I know. But just let them know that you really appreciate them because they are working hard. And I think we have some of the best teachers in the county, and I just want to let them know that I do appreciate the job they're doing.
And let me just add a few quick things, and then we'll go. I've got a wife that's a teacher, and probably right now she's at the kitchen table preparing for tomorrow. She's one of those that would like to be back in the classroom tomorrow with the kids back in the class. But she works with a lot of people that feel differently. But everybody in this room that took the time to come out tonight and to call us and text us, I've met a lot of really nice people. And that's the good thing we've got out of this. There's a lot of people I talked to that I wouldn't have ever talked to. Take the time to reach out for your legislator as well, because Mr. Spivey pointed out something very important and simple. We're getting conflicting sets of rules. We're saying go play football, but here's a set of rules that you're probably not going to get to play if anybody gets sick. We're saying put the kids back in school, but here's a set of rules that mathematically don't work. So we need a metric that makes better sense for this area. We need rules that are not conflicting. It's easy to say go back to school. That's what I want to do. Everybody here that knows me knows that's how I feel. But when you have the governor and the health department, everybody giving conflicting rules that makes it impossible to do that, we need you to get some pushback on those folks as well. Thank everyone for taking the time and email, and the people who took the time to call me. Feel free to keep doing that. You have my numbers now. I know you do. I would also like to take a moment to recognize Jane Thomas. Ms. Thomas, I wanted to thank you for your 4 years of service. I don't know if she's missed a meeting. I don't remember one if she has. If everyone would kindly give her a round of applause tonight. Thank you very much. we haven't seen eye to eye on every single issue, but I'll tell you, nobody fights harder or cares more about the students. And we appreciate you, and everyone does, and thank you so much. If there's nothing else, this meeting stands adjourned. Thank you so much.